Greetings. This is a video on techniques for character development. There are lots of memorable characters in literature, but how do writers create them? Well, the first lesson that most writers get, and the first lesson you probably got, was show, don't tell. So what is showing in writing? Well, perhaps Mark Twain expressed it best when he said, "Don't just say the old lady screamed, bring her on and let her scream." In other words, a lot of writers feel that it's better for the reader to experience the story through actions, words, thoughts, senses, and feelings, rather than through the author's exposition or summary or description of what's going on. And we'll get into more specific techniques for doing this, but first, I actually want to defend telling, because direct characterization, okay, that is when the writer tells what the character is like by making direct comment, can be done really artfully. So I don't want to say, hey, you've always got to show, because sometimes you can tell. Here's a passage from Charles Dickens' amazing novel, Great Expectations. It starts off with a little bit of dialogue, but then you'll hear some telling. "Hold your noise!" cried a terrible voice, as a man started up from among the graves at the side of the church porch. "Keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat." A fearful man, all in coarse gray, with a great iron on his leg, a man with no hat, and with broken shoes, and with an old rag tied around his head, a man who had been soaked in water, and smothered in mud, and lamed by stones, and cut by flints, and stung by nettles, and torn by briars, who limped and shivered and glared and growled, and whose teeth chattered in his head as he seized me by the chin. "Oh, don't cut my throat, sir," I pleaded in terror. "Pray, don't do it, sir." This is a fantastic character. His name is Abel Magwitch, and there's great details, an amazing voice, and a style that just grabs the reader through its repetition, through its wonderful rhythm. This is masterful writing. And you probably figured out that Dickens is also using a lot of other techniques, and they are, okay, you ready? Ready? Techniques for indirect characterization is when a writer shows what a character is like through physical description. Okay? The character's actions and words, often enhanced by sort of related to the setting. Okay, so we've got this graveyard and we've got this character acting and speaking within this graveyard, and it makes it really memorable. The character's thoughts and feelings. We don't penetrate too deeply into the thoughts of these characters, but there are times when you can, and they give you a great sense of who this character is, and they also make the character memorable. We'll look at another example of that later. And finally, what others in the narrative think about the character. And we don't really see that here, but you get a sense of it in this next passage. When Magwitch is walking away from Pip, he's released him and said, "You got to bring me back some food, and you better not tell who I am." And Pip, the little boy who is being accosted in the graveyard, says, "At the same time, he hugged his shuddering body in both arms, clasping himself as if to hold himself together, and limped toward a low church wall. As I saw him go, picking his way among the nettles and among the brambles that bound the green mounds, he looked in my young eyes as if he were eluding the hands of the dead people, stretching up cautiously out of their graves to get a twist upon his ankle and pull him in." Through this description, okay, we're not really inside the kid's head, but we sort of are because of this wonderful, vivid description that suggests his mental state. We get his sympathy. This is a scary convict, but it's also a fearful man, a victim. And because it's such a masterful piece of writing, we get a sense of Pip's innocence too. Okay? The speech can also add more depth to character. The narrator can't see it. When Pip gets older, he becomes jaded by becoming rich, and he can't see character. But later in life, when Magwitch comes back to him and says something like this, we get a lot of character revealed. He says, "Dear boy and Pip's comrade," he's actually talking to two people, "I am not a-gonna for to tell you my life like a song or a storybook, but to give it to you short and handy. I'll put it at once into a mouthful of English. In jail and out of jail. In jail and out of jail. In jail and out of jail. There you got it. That's my life pretty much down to such good times as I got shipped off arter Pip stood my friend." You get a sense of character here that is fantastic. You get a sense of the rhythm of this guy's speech. You get a sense that he doesn't want to pussyfoot around. He wants to cut right to the business. You get a sense of his pride in Pip, and you get a sense of his loyalty when he calls him my friend. Okay, so dialogue is a great way to suggest character. Here are two more examples, or I'm going to give you two more examples to show off the power of sensory details and how these techniques can sort of all be used together. Here's a very simple show don't tell sentence. You might take a sentence like, the kitchen smells weird when my sister cooks. It's kind of funny. It's kind of humorous, but if you add the right sensory details, and you come up with a sentence like this, an odd perfume of burnt toast, garlic, and ammonia wafts through the kitchen whenever my sister starts rattling pots on the stove. You get a sense of the sister not being a very good cook. You get a sense of the smells that sort of attack your nose. You get a sense of character that is much, and scene and setting and situation that is much more vivid, all because of these sensory details, which are, once again, details of sight, sound, smell, taste, and sort of any kind of tactile feeling that you get. Now to look at how all these techniques can be used together. Here's something to think about. After peeking through the peephole of her one-bedroom apartment in Greenwich Village, she opened the door of 7R to her new roommate and presented him with a set of keys. Before she'd finished explaining the intricacies of the deadbolt lock, however, she decided he must be hungry and gave him an untoasted English muffin and a glass of ginger ale she poured an hour earlier. Barely 5 feet tall in her pink flannel housecoat and open-toe slippers, 75-year-old Lartha Punkursky watched him eat, made him use a coaster like a little gentleman, and then shuddered when she saw the mountain of luggage he'd piled up outside her front door. "Young man, you were only supposed to bring a few bags." He was confused. The day they had met to discuss his subletting her apartment for a year, the little old woman had given him a glass of milk and cooed. "Wonderful, wonderful," as he described his new job in the city. But now, as she grimly shook her head at the neatly printed words on his boxes, his palms became damp. "Linens? American novels? Who packed these for you? Did the doorman with the fancy glasses say anything?" She poked a box of pants and summer shirts with her toe. He assured her he'd been discreet. He'd used the service elevator, and the super had shown him. The super had shown him, and he tipped the man generously. "Oh no!" exclaimed Lartha, digging her nails into his arm. "That one's a python." A dustball rambled across the parquet floor, but she scared it under the bookcase with a hard glance. "How am I going to explain you now?" So you can see that this is a situation, and this is a nice dominant impression paragraph, or two, in which you see a little lady who is very concerned that she'll be exposed and her apartment will be taken away from her. You see a young guy who's kind of naive, and you see lots of exaggerated descriptive details, and hopefully it is memorable. Thank you. That is the quick overview. Let's review real quick. The techniques are direct description, okay, and then indirect characterization, which is physical description, characters' actions and words, often enhanced by the setting, the character's thoughts and feelings, and what others in the narrative think about the character. Thank you. Good night.